The joyful chorus of the Clarion's navigational system rose to a crescendo as the missionary vessel slipped between two dark pillars that jutted from an outcrop of the Blackstone fortress. The rising harmony was in direct contrast to the feelings of Thaddeus the Purifier, who was usually roused by the triumphant tone of his vessel's auto-hymnals.
Master, look!
Pious Vaughan pointed over his shoulder towards a darker recess ahead, her other hand laid upon the back of the priest's command throne. Her voice was hushed with reverence, distorted by the black breather that covered nose and mouth. There was a white glow within the artificial cavern, but the gleam soon betrayed its mundane origins as the beams of another spacecraft nestled on the flat ground within. An ident code pinged across the display, confirming that it was the Vanguard, starship of Janus Draic. The Clarion responded in kind without prompt, and settled itself next to the rogue trader's craft. As hydraulics settled beneath the weight of the ship in the artificial gravity of the Blackstone fortress, a gravity whose source nobody knew, Thaddeus felt a shimmer of excitement.
"We're finally here, Vaughan,"
he told his companion.
The fortress of the abyss, lair of unbelievers and mutant filth,
she replied, gushing at the prospect. Above the mask, her eyes were bright and wide.
The cleansing shall begin.
"Not yet, pious child,"
Thaddeus reminded her.
"You must remain here for the time being. The deal with Draic is only for me."
Sadness entered her gaze, but she knew better than to raise argument against the preacher. Thaddeus rose from the seat and placed a hand on her shoulder, squeezing encouragement through the thick fabric of his zealot's robe.
"Soon, we'll delve into this pit of darkness together. When the Emperor has guided me safely through the death maze, and I return with greater knowledge, I'll lead expeditions of my own into the bowels of this hell base."
I shall monitor what I can from here, favored of the God Emperor,
she told him before slipping past into the control seat. She activated a few rooms and the main display lit up with various digital gauges, each hovering between green and orange.
There's a captive atmosphere, breathable, but not by much of a margin.
Thaddeus readied himself, taking his pocket copy of the Imperial Creed, his las pistol, and power maul at his belt. He stepped into the locked chamber that led to the boarding steps, servo stubber following him in guard mode.
"Grant me the strength to labor for your glory, God Emperor,"
he said to himself, hand hovering over the door release button.
"Protect your humble servant, if you see my course as righteous, and deliver me into thy sight, so that I may know thy will anew."
He pushed the activator. Sirens blared briefly as the locked chamber equalized pressures. Thaddeus felt lightheaded for a moment, and the outer door opened, revealing the dark interior of the Blackstone fortress. He strode down the steps with purpose, eyes adjusting to the gloom to pick out Janus Draic, standing close to the alighting ramp of the Vanguard.
"Welcome to the adventure,"
said the rogue trader.
"Glad you could make it."
"I don't do pleasantries, Draic,"
Thaddeus replied.
"Let's get started."
"There are 2 more to come."
"Your companions aren't on your ship?"
"They have their own spacecraft. It is better that way. Each vessel can support us if need be. Believe me, preacher, we shall need all the assistance we can muster." They waited in silence until a few minutes later, a slender vessel silently slipped into the lighted docking bay. Its surface seemed to ripple like oil on water, changing color until it almost disappeared from view.
"Xenos,"
hissed Thaddeus.
"you would bring in human beasts on this expedition?
I bring who I choose, replied Drake. And Amelin's Shadow Guide is the keenest shot on all of Precipice.
I will not share air with enemies of the Emperor.
We have a pact, priest, growled Drake, hand moving to his holstered pistol. I thought your word would be worth something. Thaddeus held his tongue as an aperture whispered open in the side of the newly arrived starship, a tongue-like ramp extruding down to the surface of the Blackstone Fortress. The being that stepped into the light was hard to see, a shimmering hint of a figure, as indistinct as the hull of the vessel from which it stepped. The disturbance in the air settled a few paces away and resolved itself into a tall, slender humanoid, a cloak of shifting chromatic effects slung over one shoulder, long rifle in hand.
Pernicious Eldar,
said Thaddeus, almost spitting the words. His servo stubber responded to his mood, rising up quickly from behind him, ruddy eye beams fixing on the alien's chest. The Eldar's lips moved, and a split second later, a melodious voice issued from a small badge upon her collar, shaped like a face.
False prophet of the Emperor's misguided church.
I shall not take a step further in the company of this inhuman abomination,
spat Thaddeus. Enough! Drake stepped between them, hands raised to ward them back. I am leader of this expedition. We will have enemies enough without being at each other's throats. You either follow me, or you can return to Precipice. Now. The Eldar inclined its head towards the rogue trader, apparently a gesture of acquiescence.
You possess the guidance codes, therefore it is you that acts as the steering hand.
Thaddeus clenched his teeth, biting back further insults. It did him no good to turn around and return to Precipice before they had begun their expedition. This might be his only chance to get a glimpse into the secrets of the Blackstone Fortress, and to gain some leverage over the denizens of Precipice. He relented and retreated a step, making the sign of the Aquila with his hands to his chest as he did so. Beneath its hood, the Eldar smiled thinly, eyes watching the priest closely. They all turned as a whine of plasma engines carried across the trapped atmosphere of the bay. Beyond the Clarion, another Imperial vessel touched down, flanks glinting with gold. Thaddeus was heartened to see another ship of the God Emperor, but his spirit soured as the occupant descended to meet them. He was dressed in a bizarre helm, his coat decorated with the symbols of a navigator house.
A psycho mutant!
Thaddeus rounded on Drake, fists balled at his side.
You insult my faith further.
Not all things that dwell within the Blackstone Fortress are mortal in nature, Drake said patiently, meeting Thaddeus's gaze with his own steady stare. This is Esbern of House Lacano, an experienced navigator who has traveled with me into the depths before.
He is warp-touched and cannot be trusted.
Trust is not the currency we exchange,
said the lilting voice of Amelin behind them. Thaddeus returned, holding back further curses.
What does that mean?
It is need that binds out fates to a single path.
The Eldar continued.
Each of us will journey alone to our destiny. But if we are to reach our separate destinations, we must at times share company with others. This station holds secrets as ancient as my people, and it is not for a single spirit to uncover them alone.
Drake looked at Thaddeus and then back to the Clarion, his meaning clear. The priest considered his options. He could head back to Precipice and pray for another chance to make common goal with enough companions to dare a venture into the Blackstone Fortress, or he could continue with the opportunity the God Emperor had already laid before him. It was a test, he realized. His faith was strong enough to resist the corruption around him, and that was why he had been delivered to this place. Xenos, heretics, and mutants would not sway him from his path, any more than the inhabitants of the ancient space citadel. He swallowed back his disgust, realizing that it was wounded pride as much as any true anger.
Lead on,
he said to Drake. The rogue trader ushered them across the landing bay towards a gleaming alcove in the wall. Within was a circular platform just about large enough for the four of them, alien runes inscribed into the walls around it. One of the infamous maglev transporters that allowed them to traverse the labyrinthian depths of the Blackstone Fortress.
You are sure your guidance coordinates are accurate?
Asked Espern Locarno, his voice softly projected by his elaborate helm. We are about to find out, said Drake, his hands dancing across the controls. The platform hummed into life, and Thaddeus had one last glimpse of the Clarion before it seemed to flash upwards, though in truth it was their descent that had taken it from view. With an Eldar behind him and Psyker to his right, it felt as though he were plunging into the bowels of the unholy abyss itself.